Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals and mums, Kirsty and Kathryn.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Welcome to another week's episode. Today we are talking about resilience. But specifically this time, Kirsty, we're talking about the right kind of resilience, aren't we?
Oh, yes. It's got to be the right kind and nobody wants the wrong resilience.
Exactly. So we are going to explain all about what is it? Why do we even need it? Do we even need it, in fact? So let's just start for a moment with the fact that if you look up the word resilience in the dictionary, you'll see something along the lines of the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. And Kirsty just pulled a face at me. So there's a couple of words. We like to latch onto words, don't we, Kirsty? There's a couple in there that we're not quite so keen on. And I think we're going to agree, because we often do, on the ones that we're not so keen on. For me, it's that withstand is definitely one that I don't gravitate towards, because that has this idea of enduring something, like sitting in it and suffering in it. What do you think? Does that have a similar connotation for you?
Yes, I have to say withstand wasn't the one that really got me. But now you mention it, yeah, withstand, it's like that kind of immovable object in the face of the storm. It's just, I refuse to give way in any way at all. Too many ways that, yeah, standing immovable in the face of what's happening. Whereas sometimes that just results in being blown over, doesn't it?
So what was it? Tell me, what word what was the one that made you pull the face?
Toughness. That just had all sorts of connotations of not letting it get to you, not letting it affect you, whatever's going on, and sort of pushing through, stiff upper lip, pretending you're okay. And I think that can be as harmful as anything in terms of trying to deal with difficulties. Do you think it's... Didn't like that. And recover quickly from... the whole definition.
Oh, you don't want to get to...
Recover
I
quickly
like that.
from... It's, don't let it keep you down. You mustn't give in to it. Bounce back is what I'm getting from all of that.
I don't like. I feel sometimes there's connotations. I didn't like the toughness bit either. I think that for me has this sort of thicker skin thing, like armor up, protect yourself, and let it kind of like almost like bounce off you. Like I've used a picture before when I've talked about resilience of like a suit of armor. It's like, here I am, bulletproof, nothing's getting through. I'm joking, like all okay in here, no problems. But really, you can't even move properly, can't even see properly. So there's no flexibility, there's no give, no bend. And yeah, this idea of, well, look, I don't think we hear this phrase so much anymore. I'd be interested to see if you agree. Manning up. When did that become a phrase? Wow. I mean, we talk about a bit of sexism in there, but it's not a nice phrase, is it? Because we all know what we mean by it, don't we? Which is this idea of, well, I say we all know what we mean. I guess to me, it's this idea of, the stiff upper lip. Don't let it's like a very unemotional type word, isn't it? It's sort of like, let it bounce off you and keep going regardless, kind of thing. And I don't like that. It's a very kind of hard-skinned approach. So we're going to come on to talk about this, because I think resilience is needed and it is a good thing in the right sense, but it doesn't have to be this kind of, whoever came up with manning up, bleh. I know you'll agree with that, Kirsty.
Oh, absolutely. That it comes straight back to the whole idea of toughness for me, manning up and being tough and pretending it doesn't matter and everything. And it's a very masculine energy around dealing with emotion, isn't it? And in honor of the occasion, I am wearing my woman up t-shirt. Woman up rather than man up. Why not have both? And you can deal with difficult emotions in a more feminine way and still be resilient, I believe.
Absolutely, which is brilliant, because we're going to talk a little bit about that, especially when it comes to this idea of being a bit more flexible with it. It's not like literally you think of those bullets like ricocheting off the suit of armor. It's very rigid and hard, isn't it? And it's very interesting. You picked up on the recover quickly from difficulties, which was the part I liked more. But I think you're absolutely right. It's the word quickly put in there almost seems to suggest you might be able to just sort of skip over something. And actually, that's going to depend on what's happened. Let's be honest. It's going to vary according to what's gone on. It might not be a quickly thing, but there is something, at least in that idea of the word recover, that I do quite like, rather than, not staying down for long. Let's hope, even if it's not necessarily super quick, but it's like, it's not going to keep you down. Do you remember that song, Chumbawamba, I get knocked down, but I get up again? Do you remember that one?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're never going to keep me down. Blast from the past, isn't it? But I'm not suggesting quite like one of those things that like flips straight back up.
Weebles did you have weebles and kids? There are things you couldn't quite knock over. Yeah, they always bounce back.
Yeah. It could be that, you get back up, even if it's perhaps a little bit more slowly. But the idea of, you flex rather than just have to be so bulletproof. And I just think the other idea I have about resilience is this idea is about battling through alone. Do you ever get that sense that it sort of seems to be, so it's like a quality that we have, but it doesn't mean that you just manage it all on your own. And I think that's quite an important point, because actually battling through stuff on your own can be unbelievably tough. So for me, resilience doesn't mean just turning it all on you and it being all for you to recover. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. That's an interesting point. And for me, that kind of comes back to that whole concept of manning up. That has always been, for me, a very solitary way of dealing with things. The idea of manning up is you keep it all in, you keep it to yourself, and you pretend it's not happening, basically act like it's not happening. And it's all on you to carry it.
Yeah, definitely. So the short answer to the question of do we need it? Well, I think the short answer is just yes. I think
absolutely. That's a slightly longer one. Yeah. Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah. We like the word absolutely, don't we? We realise that after our first couple of episodes. But the thing is, yes, we do need it. And the reason we need it is because, let's just be honest, things don't just go smoothly all the time. And in fact, life would be rather boring if it did. But, we can't control everything. Unwanted things are going to happen. Outcomes aren't going to go our way. Situations are going to arise that we don't like. This kind of stuff is just going to happen all the time. And that's no reflection on us or anything that we're doing or anything that we're being even. So yes, the short answer is we should be at least a little bit interested in having some resilience. But as we're going to go on to explain, hopefully the right kind. And I kind of have come up with this sort of little cycle, which is a possible way of looking at resilience. And we thought it might be helpful just to have a little chat through that.
Yes, I was going to say absolutely again, but let's go for trying to keep it below 20 times in this episode, shall we?
Yes.
I've claimed
that would be good.
You're allowed a couple. So your cycle here, which I really like, has got 4 key stages.
Yes. So I'll just briefly say what the 4 stages are, and we can perhaps sort of talk through them in a bit more detail. Yeah. So the stages are acceptance, step 1, help, step 2, choices, step 3, and step 4, it's some kind of moving on or forwards, or maybe diagonally. Could be in an unexpected direction, but there's just an element of some kind of movement. And I'll explain a bit more why I've specifically used those words when we get to that step.
Okay, so acceptance. Tell me what you mean by acceptance.
Yeah, it's one of those words, isn't it? It can mean a plethora of things. And I just want to say, first of all, I don't mean acceptance in a keel over and give up kind of sense. Like, do you know what I mean? Like an
oh my God, this is it. There's nothing I can do. It's all over.
Exactly. Yeah, like this is my lot kind of acceptance. I don't mean that kind of acceptance, but I do mean just some kind of recognition, acknowledgement that the thing has happened. So it could be, an example could be something like you're facing redundancy at work, or it could be, your house sale has fallen through. There are going to be circumstances that are totally beyond your control. They're undesirable, perhaps unexpected, all of those things. Maybe you didn't get the job offer that you went for that you really hoped that you might do. So there's a number of situations these things can happen.
Somebody ate the last biscuit.
Sorry, say that again?
Somebody ate the last biscuit, that sort of thing. Yeah.
I love that. The last biscuit and redundancy on the same page for you, Kirsty. I love it.
Some people have accused me of struggling with priorities. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. No.
Yes, these things
I think we're going to have to try. We'll have to get biscuits into every episode. I think that's going to be our challenge, isn't it? I'm sure we've mentioned it in another episode.
I don't think it's really a challenge for me, to be honest, but yeah.
Me neither. So just going back to this idea of acceptance before we go off onto more biscuits talk. I mean that kind of accepting just the reality. It's not about in that blame sense or woe is me kind of sense. It's just that kind of, okay, this is the situation now. It's not what I perhaps expected, but it is what I am facing. And it does usually bring emotions with it. Let's be honest, we're not robots, we're humans. We're going to feel probably things like anger, sadness, disappointment, rage, whatever it might be. There's probably going to be some negative emotions. And what I'd say to that is, that's fine. I'm not saying don't have the negative emotions. Obviously, we don't want to sit in them for too long, because that's akin to keeping your hand on the hot plate. I've spoken about this before. I love this little analogy. Have you heard of this one, Kirsty? The hand on the hot plate?
Yeah.
Because it's just a bit like it's like you keeping your hand there and then you wonder why it hurts. Or there's a really brilliant expression about something about taking the poison and expecting the other person to die. When you've got that kind of rate, it's like holding on to negative emotions isn't perhaps healthy in a long-term type position, but it's very natural to experience. So, and you had a great take on this, didn't you, Kirsty, about when you've got emotions that are on the more negative side?
Yeah, I mean, they are a natural reaction. And I think there's a key difference there between reaction and response. You have that initial reaction, but how you then choose to respond is something else. But you're gonna feel shit, frankly, when the bad things happen. You are going to feel shit. And for me, that's at the root of the acceptance. Allow that to happen. And a phrase that I heard from somebody a little while ago, which has really stuck with me when it comes to dealing with those emotions, is let them come, let them be, let them go. And the more you fight them, the more you try to pretend they're not happening or that they shouldn't be happening, and you just tamp them down, the more focus and energy you're giving them and the stronger they get. So for me, that's the acceptance bit, not pretending it's not happening. I mean, to go back to the biscuit analogy, if there's no biscuit in the packet, you don't go, oh my God, there should be a biscuit. This is so terrible. I can't go on. There ought to be a biscuit there. Why isn't there a biscuit there? How could there not be a biscuit there? Oh my God. You go, I haven't got any biscuits. And you're cross, or I am anyway, very cross, but then you move on. And that's a natural way to do it.
You go and buy some more biscuits, don't you, Kirsty?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously there is an easy fix, which there isn't to a lot of the tough situations we go through. But that initial reaction and sort of response to the reaction, so often people seem to feel that they're not allowed to give into those difficult emotions, that they're supposed to be suppressed or denied, that you're supposed to man up, have the stiff upper lip, and just push through. And
I guess there's probably a little bit of a balancing act there, isn't there, between allowing yourself to have that rant, whatever it might be, because I think you're right. If you try and fight it, you kind of haven't processed that initial response to something, and you kind of need to do that to be able to get to the next bit, I think.
yes.
But then the difficulty is you don't want to keep too much energy and focus on that negative, like you said with your biscuits. You don't want to stay there for too long, because you might just compound that sort of negativity, and it can grow, can't it? It can bring in other secondary emotions that are also negative, and we kind of don't want to keep compounding on top of the negativity. So I guess it's a little bit of a balancing act to strike there. So I think we're saying don't gloss over it, but maybe don't absolutely stew and dwell on it.
Stew, I like that. There's a difference between allowing it and wallowing in it, isn't there? And I'm desperately trying to work out whether those are anagrams of each other.
I know, yeah. No, two W's for wallowing, isn't there?
Oh, yes. Yes. Excellent point. They're almost anagrams. It would have been nice if they were. But yeah, allowing it is positive, wallowing, not so much.
Love that, because that's really easy to remember as well. I love little succinct phrases that help you remember. So allow, but don't wallow. Love that. Okay, so I think we've covered that acceptance step.
Yeah. So step 2.
There. On to step 2. So this is now, okay, the help part. And I think sometimes we immediately skip to options part, which is actually the choices part, which is part 3. And I think sometimes it's helpful to have that pause and think, what is the help I might need to work out the next part? And sometimes that can be something really simple. It can be just a little gap of knowledge or information. So, for example, if there is potential redundancy, you might already be tempted to leap ahead into that case of choices. So I'll put myself forward for voluntary. I'll start applying for jobs. I'll brush up my CV. You rush ahead. Whereas actually, it might be, okay, what might I need to know to help make more informed choices for my next step? How many roles are at risk? Is it my department? What else can I understand about this situation to help me process it? So it doesn't necessarily, when I say the word help, I don't necessarily always mean help from another person, because I think that's quite a natural response to when we say help. We think of help from another person, don't we? Do you think that, Kirsty? When you think of the word help, is that what you
do? Yeah,
think of?
I think when I hear help, I automatically preface it with asking for. Whereas maybe resources can be a good word. What resources could be helpful for you here?
Yeah.
Helpful has a slightly different connotation, doesn't it? So if you were to say, what would be helpful for me in this situation, rather than what help do I need, that changes it slightly for me. You say, to thinking about what could benefit me, what could I use here?
Yeah, I like that. Perhaps we'll update the steps, but helpful. It's because what is going to help bring this situation towards the next step? Because sometimes we can make inferences, can't we, from something negative that we didn't want, particularly when it was unexpected. We can make inferences to what this means and skip this important step. So I'd really encourage people to think, what else might I need to know? So, for example, if it was you didn't get the job that you went for, there might be some really helpful feedback that you could get. So you might have already thought, they thought I was terrible. I'll never get a job like this again. Whereas actually, if you ask the question, you might find out something really interesting or help, again, using the word helpful for the next step. Because, I mean, we both have HR backgrounds, don't we? And we know what it's like to be on the other side of the table interviewing people. I remember clearly a role that I interviewed for, and we had 8 brilliant candidates, but only one job at the end of the day. And you realise it was super competitive. And it's not a reflection on any of those 8 individuals, but we did only have one role to offer at the end.
It's often the tiniest of things that swing it, and it really isn't a sort of a personal reflection or even a professional reflection on other candidates in many cases.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm just going to caveat that even though we've spoken a bit about this help can take many guises, I would also add, don't rule out talking to someone else about it.
Yes.
And I'm sure that probably goes without saying. And that can equally be someone close to you, but also it could be someone who has that little bit of distance, isn't perhaps invested in the outcome, or will help you perhaps wallow in any disappointment that you might be having.
People like a coach, for instance.
Yes, for example, a good coach. Because it actually helps you process what you're thinking and feeling about these things. I think it helps you get past that first step, the disappointment, all of those things, realize perhaps some of the bits of information that you might need, or other sources of help that might be useful, and then also build on to step 3, which is when we come on to the choices. Do you think, is that all making sense so far? Do you think there's anything we've missed?
Absolutely no. And I think that help, it's around what can help make the situation better. And it's also about recognizing that you may need help in moving from that wallowing to allowing. And exactly as you said, that talking to someone who is a bit removed from the situation can make all the difference there. Especially if you've been doing a bit of wallowing, that there is the risk that you no longer feel able to talk to those closest to you, that you've done it so much and you're going around in circles. It becomes another difficulty in the situation, whereas finding somebody a little removed and a chance to sort of air it in a different environment, in a different way, can give you different perspectives and a bit of respite from what's going on in your head.
Yeah, I love that.
Brilliant for that.
One of the coaching books I've been reading recently has a phrase which I really love, and it's the coach's ability to sometimes help you think, is this in aid of new thinking? So when you want to hit the replay button again about how unfair the situation and all those things, and I get it, I really do, because it's so human. You want someone to understand how unfair it was that this thing has happened. But truthfully, that's going to keep you in this position. It's going to keep you in the early stages of this cycle, as opposed to moving forward into what does this mean for you now and next, which is where we come to the choices bit. So step 3. And this is also where we get to take back a little bit of control. I mean, control is a very interesting concept, isn't it? And we're probably going to talk about that, I'm sure, in various other times, because we're not actually in control of a huge amount. But actually, when we look at choices, this is where we are taking back a bit of control, because we're thinking, what direction am I going to take now with this position that I've now found myself in? I didn't want to be in this position, but what am I going to do about it now? And actually, sometimes there are more choices available to us than we at first realise, particularly on our own, and if we've skipped that important second step that we were just talking about. And sometimes there are choices that aren't even the obvious ones, even if you put them in the mix to rule them out. I think that's fine. But just acknowledging actually the real scope of choices available to us, I think that's actually quite important and enlightening, don't you think?
Empowering, even, to use a slightly hackneyed word, but that does feel empowering, because I struggle to think of a situation where you have absolutely no choice. We confuse a lack of choice with choices we don't like, and things that we don't feel are right for us, or that might be too uncomfortable or scary or too big. Maybe it's just me, but there is a definite tendency to dismiss those and to feel that we have no choice because we want something that feels good and easy, because that seems fair because we've just had a shit time.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I love that. The choices include the ones that we don't like or that seem tough, but they also can make us think about, well, actually, okay, that might just feel a step too far. but at least it's opened my eyes to something maybe in that direction. Do you know what I mean? It might not be as drastic or as radical as that option, but at least it's like opening up your thinking as opposed to it being a very blinkered, like you said, my choices are limited or I have no choice. And sometimes we can feel that response and then we just believe it, don't we? Because like you said, it's unfair. So we're annoyed about the unfairness. We want the easy way out. Doesn't seem to be there. So we limit the choices because we've tuned into that way of thinking. Love that.
And sometimes it's easier to be a victim, right? It can take less effort to be a victim. And I think we all dip into that mode sometimes. And that's okay, as long as you don't stay there. Back to allowing rather than wallowing. But the other thing from what you're saying there around, all the choices that we have, but maybe we don't like, or that feel too big or too scary right now, that can also highlight the fact that maybe we choose to stay where we are, to do what we're doing, to be, to allow things to be how they are can be a choice rather than something that's forced on us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had a good friend of mine. Funny enough, she was actually in a slightly different context. She was contemplating coaching, and the coach said to her something on the lines of, "Staying where you are is also a choice." Because we forget it's almost like the default option, isn't it? Because if you're not actively choosing something else, you're choosing to stay where you are. So sometimes that's the right thing, but sometimes it's not. I think it's the key thing is to actually evaluate, consider all of what is available. And sometimes it's hard to see that on your own. There's a great phrase, all I see is all there is. Because it's self-fulfilling, isn't it? Because all you see is all there is. But actually, sometimes you need a little bit of help to see more in the first place. So I'm hoping that we've gone through steps 1 to 3, the acceptance, the help, the choices, and then that final step, this moving on, moving forward diagonally, whatever it might be.
In circles.
Yes. So it's this idea, and the reason it's this moving in whatever direction it might be, rather than bouncing back, because I think a lot of people might be surprised that we haven't said bouncing back a bit more, because I think I've heard that term quite a lot. Resilience is your ability to bounce back. And I don't like it because it's this idea of like, well, this thing's happened and I'm back to where I was, almost like that elastic band that you've twanged and it's come back exactly, and it's in the same state and everything. But the reality is that may not be the case. Things have changed. You may have changed your future. If we're talking about a big thing like a redundancy, or you didn't get that house move that you thought you were going to, these can be quite significant events. So the idea that you bounce back to where you were doesn't seem quite right, does it? It's about you've moved on forward in some kind of slightly different direction to what was expected, but you have moved. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah, like you, the bounce back doesn't describe the process for me, because it makes it sound so easy, doesn't it? Okay, you're going to have that horrible bit of bouncing down and hitting you at bottom or whatever, but then you just bounce back, you just straight back up. And well, I think anyone who's ever experienced anything really difficult in their lives knows you don't come straight back up. You claw your way back up. We're quite often with a lot of slithering backwards as part of that process, but you still sort of climb out of that hole you're in eventually. But how you emerge on the other side, where you emerge on the other side, is not exactly how and where you were before.
Yeah. And I know you had some really interesting insights. If the resilience, for example, is to do with grief.
Yeah, I mean, I had some training a while back on talking to people who are grieving, and a phrase that gets used a lot, which can be really hard to hear, is about moving on. Shouldn't you be moving on by now? It's time to move on. And you don't move on from the loss of a loved one. You don't move on from grief. but you can move forward with that grief. You can move forward with the memories, and you can move forward as somebody who feels significantly changed by that loss. But you move forward with all of that. It becomes part of you and who you are. It's not something you leave in the past.
I love that. I think that's such a lovely take. So that's our 4-step cycle for what we think is a slightly more helpful approach to resilience. So I hope that has been helpful to those of you who are listening. And we want to move on to some of the good news, because what I think is great about it's about, to be honest, it's like this with most of the things that we talk about. It's not a kind of black or white situation that you either have this thing or you don't. So I don't want people to think, well, I'm not a resilient person, like it's some kind of definitive quality, because it's actually about thoughts, behaviors, and actions that we can all do and practice to help sort of build and expand this concept of our resilience. And it's all about our ability to adapt, maintain perspective, and make a choice. And the chances are we've actually probably all done a lot of this already in our lives. And I think we're probably going to come and talk about that as our question at the end of the episode, as we like to do. But yeah, I think people sometimes underestimate that they have these resilient qualities.
Yes, it's not, I don't think, a sort of personality trait that you're born with or not. It's something you learn, and it's modeled to you as you grow up as well. What you see around you, impacts how you're going to react to difficulty and what you think is an appropriate way of dealing with it, whether that's by imitating the behavior you see, or whether it's by sort of doing the polar opposite because you've seen how that pans out for people. So we are so much a product of our conditioning in terms of our programmed responses, but that's not necessarily who we are. We can choose. I mean, that 4-step cycle, those are steps that anyone can take on board and apply to themselves. And it's not, again, it's not bounce back. There's not a magic wand. It's not just you decide to be resilient and you are. It's a process you work through, and sometimes it could take a very long time. Sometimes maybe it will feel like bounce back. That's great if it does. And that's probably an important part of it. Resilience is not a single standard process, is it?
Yeah. So let's share a couple of our favourite quotes on resilience before we end with our question. So we have a couple here. So they all have a slightly different take on resilience, but hopefully I think the overriding kind of essence is some good messages in there. So first one is Christopher Reeve. A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. That's quite powerful, isn't it?
It is, especially considering what he went through. Yeah. That's I read his book, Still Me, and very emotional. But yeah, he so demonstrated that in spite of an overwhelmingly awful situation, you can still move forward and find a life worth living. The ultimate resilience, I guess. And there's one that I like. She stood in the storm, and when the wind did not blow her away, she adjusted her sails. That's from Elizabeth Edwards. And that idea of just, you adapt to your situation.
Yeah.
And maybe it's going to be a bit bumpy and you might get quite seasick with it all, but you can adapt.
Yeah. And it's about that ability to, like we mentioned before, it's about not being too sort of rigid. It's about seeing where you might adjust in the face of what's happened, because as we've mentioned, the stuff is going to happen, whether it's quite extreme like Christopher Reeve's example, or whether it's smaller things, but even at the time they can still feel very significant to us, can't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's when you were talking a bit about that, it's the reaction that we have versus the response that we can later choose to have. I've just got one more that I think is particularly nice. It's resilience is very different than being numb. Resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt, you fall, but you keep going. So that lovely idea about, like you've said so well, about it's about moving forward, even in that perhaps slightly unexpected direction, and you have perhaps changed, or you have memories and whatever it might be that you're keeping with you, but you do keep going. And I think we all have done that and probably have discounted it, which leads us on really, really nicely to our question. But yeah, that wasn't on purpose. But do you want to ask our question for today? And we will both, as we always do, we will both answer it.
Absolutely. I mean, we will answer it, and we invite you to answer it for yourself too. So our question is, can you recall a time when you demonstrated your resilience? And what does that tell you about yourself?
Yeah, Kathryn? It's a good question to contemplate, because it actually is going to make you think. And we're not saying, about reliving the negative experience part. It's about thinking about how you responded to it. And my own example was, it's going back away now, but it was the most obvious one I could think of. I was actually very, very unwell when I was pregnant with my daughter. So this is going back to 2013, and it was unexpected. I didn't even actually know I was ill, which sounds very strange. It's a condition called preeclampsia. It does quite strange things to people, but I didn't really know that I had it until it was kind of a bit too late, and I ended up in hospital. But the reason I think, because I didn't really have any choice but to sort of go through the experience. But equally, I think I had to be quite tough. My daughter was born very prematurely as a result. But I was just so determined that even though this is not the end of my pregnancy that I had anticipated, even though I didn't even get to write a birth plan, let alone try and stick to one, I hadn't even packed a bag, I hadn't left work, hadn't done any of those things that I perhaps would have ideally liked to. But also, in a way, none of that really mattered that much. It was much more about, okay, it's us in hospital. And I was so determined to be well, I kind of didn't entertain any other options. And I think, it's a very strange chapter. I can kind of almost see it through like a lens now, if that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, I'm actually quite proud of how I got through that chapter.
That's a hell of a thing to go through. So yeah. I wanted to use the phrase bounce back then.
I did. There was no bouncing back. There's been a change after that.
But I guess that's when we look at what we've achieved, that's perhaps when the bounce back thing does kick in, and we suddenly can see, actually, we're here and now we're here. And when you sort of picture it like that, you can see it in a more, I think I see bounce back in a more positive way. But yeah, I mean, how did my resilience in a not entirely dissimilar situation was pretty shit, actually. Yeah, because not as extreme as your example, but my pregnancy, or my birth of my son, did not go in quite the way I planned. And then when he was born, he turned out to have a condition that hadn't been diagnosed antenatally, which required several surgeries, the first two before he was 6 months old. And it was all a bit of a whirlwind, and I was all over the shop, really. But I did that whole, looking back on it, I was in pieces inside, but I did that whole stiff upper lip, putting a brave face on it thing externally, the whole tough thing. And I didn't cope with it well. It probably looked like I was, but in hindsight, I'm only just really picking up the pieces and processing that properly, sort of more than 20 years on. So that's a very good reason for thinking about resilience and applying those steps in difficult situations. But I think now I'm much better at planning resilience. Can you plan resilience? Not so much planning, but being consciously aware of the need for it. Just when those days when your mental health takes a plunge and there's no obvious reason for it, and you're just sitting there going, why do I feel so shit? I shouldn't feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. And those steps, when you talk me through those steps, I really identified with them in how I deal with that now, because it's that acceptance, that allowing it. Okay, I shouldn't. I don't know why I am, but I am. There we go. What's going to help me in this situation? What are my choices for helping myself to feel better or get through this? I know it will pass. What are my choices for managing it? And then, how do I move forward this time? I can, you can see it as a sign. If it keeps happening, it's, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of this. Or you can choose to just see it as something you will keep getting out of. So, those steps really highlighted a process that I hadn't realised I was working through and that I can now do more consciously. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, I think that's the perfect note on which to end. So thank you all for listening, and do have a go answering the question as well. And I hope that the cycle is helpful. We will see you soon for another episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.